This is our fourth meeting of the 8-part series that our friend and teacher, Roshi Eve Marko, has crafted on aging. And I'm finding it compelling, to be sure, and I hope you are all as well. The topic for today, it was just there a minute ago and now it's gone. Let's see. The topic today is memory or memory loss, if I remember correctly. As we age, and I think more than a few of us are familiar with this. So I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to my friend Eve. And Eve, thank you so much for all of the work that you've put into this to offer this great slate of topics. And before I jump off, I just want to remind everybody, we'll meet again on the 8th of January, same time. So you can mark your calendar and come back for that one. So Eve, I'm going to turn it over to you and I'm going to silence my microphone.
Hopefully not permanently, Jeff. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I personally find it's really fun for me because every time I do these classes, it's like a whole new journey, frankly. And I'm saying, wait, I'm changing my view because I don't like to look at myself. I like to look at you. It really is a journey to uncover this process of aging and different aspects of it. So I'm doing the same journey you are. I'm learning so much, and I'm learning a lot from you. And I want to really thank people who put things on chats. In fact, I'm a lot out of reading chats, and I get a lot out of reading your feedback on surveys that Chloe sends out. So to the degree that you want to really put things in there because it'll make a difference, it makes a difference. It's certainly in point of consideration and study. This one isn't so much about memory loss, but rather the exchange of short-term memory for long-term, which is one of the things that really marks older age. And it's such an interesting thing. So we're going to look at that. Before we do that, I like to just reflect back on something on the module 2 weeks ago was, Am I Still Loved? And I look at feedback about that and a couple of things I want to respond to. So some of the feedback asked for more explicit prompts so that when there's questions, how do you respond here, or we're going to break up into groups, that you're clearer about what the prompts are. And I will make that, I will certainly make that effort. I do love to use poetry and quotes as prompts and kind of freely let's see what comes up for people, but I will make an effort to be more specific. And then about the sharing that comes up. So one very concrete thing was, when people tell stories, can they kind of get to the point? I love stories. I just love stories. I tell stories. I write stories. And at the same time, we are a fairly big group. So to the degree that we want to accommodate as many people as possible, let's keep our stories as beautiful as they are, and they are, compact and get to the point. The other thing is that twice now people have written that some things trigger them, or they trigger negative responses in them, and that somehow more caution has to be taken with that, maybe a kind of, what do you call it? A kind of led meditation afterwards. So I think, I forget who said that being old is not for sissies. It really is not for sissies. And I like when raw things come up. There's going to be hopefully more rawness when we get to the question, am I a man or a woman at this age? And really look at what happens to our bodies, what works, what doesn't work, or works less, or works differently. That's pretty raw. And yeah, we need to have a space that makes it comfortable for us. I'm not much into safe spaces, as people who've studied with me know. I don't believe there's such a thing as a safe space. But as we touch on things, they may trigger certain trauma. I'm not a good de-rawer, how to de-raw the raw things. I also don't know many of you, so it's hard for me to assess who are these people and what's, I treat us all as grown-ups. But for me, this gathering is about widening horizons of what is possible as we age. And that means going into messy things, exploring them, and always seeing what's there to uncover. So even as I want to bring respect into differing sensibilities, differing sensitivities, what I really want to emphasize is the importance of curiosity. Like, wow, what is happening? I never thought of that. This is so interesting. That's the spirit of this gathering. And the other thing that was really wonderful is that last night I had like my monthly catch up with my friend, teacher, and poet Peter Levitt. And Peter's talked about, I said to him that, of course, in Zen, we don't talk about memory much. We might see it as a distraction from be here now. And Peter talked about how he sees the psyche or consciousness as something that is always expanding, integrating, working towards full realization. It's a beautiful thing about our consciousness. It's constantly asking for more and taking us into newer trips and more explorations. This mind is so rich. It's a microcosm of the universe. It's an infinite mind. And, we are experiencing new things all the time. So, for instance, let's say with little kids, you could see how they take in new sights and new thoughts and new ideas, like a vacuum cleaner. They're just vacuuming new information all the time, When at our age, I don't know that I'd say about myself that my mind is like a vacuum cleaner, but it's somehow sending me back to do work I didn't do before. I think that's what it's doing. It's sending me back. And back is now. I'll talk about that. But it's telling me, go look at events that you remember in a particular way and now add memory to it, like add imagination. And memory, we all know, is imagination. If you've ever talked to people, well, I remember it this way. No, I remember it this way. You know that there's imagination here at work. So we're kind of now adding the imagination over time into this whole thing. And what are we coming up with now, you see? So certainly I've always felt for many, many years that when I'm triggered, it tells me I have work to do. And interesting work, not work, but that spirit of curiosity. Also, what's really going on here? Something raw, something to be learned and explored. So there is a spirit of respect here for all our differences. And there's also a spirit of curiosity. What is all this about? And I loved the way Peter said to me last night, the psyche is so generous. It gives us all these opportunities to uncover new things. things we thought we knew, but we really didn't, surprises about our life, about who we are, about who they were. That's and it goes on and on and on. That's very, very generous. Okay. And before I go on with this memory question, again, I want to thank you for putting whatever you do on chats and for responding to the survey. I want to thank Jeff and Chloe once again for their work in putting this together, for putting it on the media library so that you, friends, associates, can look it up and see it. We have everything there except the song, which I'm not to start with because YouTube doesn't. Jeff told me that YouTube does not permit us to put this on with a song. Am I right, Jeff?
That's right. I think we got cease and desist or something like that because of copyright. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. But I think, I think we can hear it this one time. And therefore to remind you again that they do this work. It's free for you. It's the giving season. But in Buddhism, dana is giving season never ends. It doesn't begin, doesn't end. That's how it is. So we thank you for your donations and your help. Okay, so with that spirit, let's get to the point. Jeff, could you put on music and the lyrics too? Thank you. Yeah, it's such a great song. There's more to say. The lines that really grabbed me about this song that I think really are connect to this session is, can it be that it was so simple then, or has time rewritten every line? I don't have, I'll respond to Willow. I don't have a doubt that time has rewritten every line. There's no doubt about it. And the other lines that I really love there is, what's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. I don't believe that either. I don't believe that. Those lines I don't quite agree with. And yes, that is Barbra Streisand. I will say this, I also looked at Beyonce's version of the song, and Beyonce performed this at the Kennedy Awards when they honored Barbra Streisand, and she sang this song. And she was such a magnificent artist, sang the song exactly as Barbra Streisand sang it. Literally, if you listen to it, it's amazing. When I first saw it, I thought, oh, she must have really played with it. She didn't play with it at all. She literally matched her intonation syllable by syllable, word by word with Streisand. It was quite an amazing thing to see. Gave me a whole other thought or impression of Beyonce when I saw that. So Bernie Glassman used to say that the reason the old Zen masters always talked about be here now is because they couldn't remember anything else. So Zen, those of you who are Zen practitioners know that Zen likes us to be in the present, be here now, always pay attention. And when we get older, it's easy to do because so many things are slower for us. I walk slower, I go down the stairs more mindfully, I wrap gifts with more care, I cook with more care. So in some way, if you're a Zen practitioner, you think you always have to be in the present. But the present is everything. It contains the past and contains the future. Because if everything is now, whatever we think of as that was then is now. It's really now. The founder of Soto Zen said, let me read this, Dogen, A.A. Dogen, each moment is all being. Each moment is the entire world. Reflect now whether any being or any world is left out of the present moment. Nothing is left out of the present moment, including our memories of what happened many years ago. So our culture talks about older people kind of going off into some never land of the past. You know, people say, well, I looked at my father and he had that look of his eyes where I don't know where he is and he's not here. And James Hillman, in his chapter on memory, has a wonderful story about a younger woman trying to get her mother, so to speak, into the present. Here, now, what did you drink? What did you eat? How was your sleep? How's this? And the mother is doing something else. She's not in another age and she's not in another land. You know, she hasn't gone away to a different time. Because everything that is in our consciousness, I think, is there to answer the question, who am I? What am I? And consider that that question isn't just personal to me or you, that maybe something else, something way bigger, is asking the question, who am I? What am I? Just consider that. Now, the answer may be, I'm the woman who made herself a cappuccino this morning, on a 9-year-old Italian coffee maker with 2% milk. That's a fine answer. It's not that satisfying. And maybe that's why, to answer that question in a more satisfying way, I go into, oh, who was this woman back then? It's still now, but who is she when she grew up? What happened with her parents? What happened in her marriage? What happened when her husband died? And it's all tailored at that question, who am I? And what am I? And it's in pursuit of that question that we continue to remember. Yeah. Oh. Now let me ask you a question. What's the difference between memory and nostalgia? Think about it. You have an answer, please put up your electronic hand. It sometimes helps to put almost like to a column. Is this, okay, I go back here a lot. So is this memory? Is this nostalgia? What's the difference? Yes, I see Jan Gary, please.
Yeah, I'm a memoirist and I teach memoirs, so we talk about this a lot. You know, memory is more an unfiltered reflection, whether it's been embellished when you remember it or not, but you don't know that. This is what you remember. This is how you remember. When you add things and start changing it so that it seems better or worse, or you attach, oh, that was much better. I think it's all the attachments we put around it that make it nostalgia. Super sweet or super sour.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. Jeff O'Keefe, who momentarily left the screen, actually had written a while ago something about memory, and he actually looked it up and said, he wrote this. I'm evoking Jeff here. Nostalgia combines the Greek nostos, or home, with agos, pain. So somewhere more recently, we get to home sickness, or in modern usage, sentimental longing or wistful feelings for the past. Yeah. Lynn, would you like to say something?
I think I see when I see memory more with something that I might be concerned about accuracy, and nostalgia to me is more about feeling. Nostalgia has feeling automatically assigned to it somehow, but not so much. And nostalgia doesn't have to be accurate either.
Yeah. Interesting to use the word accurate. What's accurate about memory or the past? Who can really capture that and say, oh, that's exactly what happened? I think that's a really interesting question. Yes, Marjorie, please.
Am I being heard? I think that nostalgia has an element of clinging to it. It's as if by telling the story of the past with a particular emotion that we then can go back there. There is some kind of clinging instead of moving into the present moment and fresh understanding. There's a wish to lock in, if you will, to a memory in a certain kind of way so that it becomes fixed. And so there's kind of an attachment there that takes away from the freshness of that psychic digestion that you were mentioning earlier. Whereas memory is actually attempting to reintegrate all of the experience that the self has had.
Okay, thank you. I also see a question for me to please raise my voice, and my volume is at the highest. And if I'll try to speak up as much as I can. Because I think as I'm listening, I tend to get thoughtful. When I get thoughtful, I get quiet. Please, Joanna.
So I had put in the chat that nostalgia tend to be sentimental and idealized, even though memories, recollection can be different for each person going through it. With nostalgia, I think it's more personal, that memory may be, I don't know, memory may be more, nostalgia for me is like kind of a bit of clinging, like just really idealizing what's happened in the past. But I don't know, we often idealize memory in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Linda Sussman, please. And after Mary, we need to go on. Please, Linda.
Just a note here that nostalgia was really regarded as an illness on the part of soldiers who were injured or battle weary. And I think we always have to remember that nostalgia has a quality of vast longing in it. And the effort to cure us of nostalgia often doesn't respect this deep longing that is part of it.
Interesting. Thank you really for sharing that. Yeah. Hey, Mary. Hi there.
I just succinctly, it strikes me that nostalgia is kind of like an emotional, psychological reconciling of our impermanence.
Thank you. So yeah, there is, I think as Jeff noted, a wistful quality about nostalgia. A wistful quality about nostalgia, like, wasn't that great? Wasn't that beautiful? That was so lovely. It's more sentimental, is how I think of it. And then there's memory. Oh, but about that, I want to say something. There's a really very beautiful koan. Koans are tales that to some people make no sense at all. And we work on them. But here's one. A monk once asked a very famous Zen master, Master Fuketsu, both speaking and silence really aren't enough. How can we be free and non-transgressing? So, we talk about silence in connection with the absolute. Silence is the way you get into the basic essence. Whereas talking, the minute we use words, we've added another layer of confusion. But we have to speak. So there's speaking and there's silence, and those are two ends of a range of response. If I want to stay with the essence, I'm silent. If I want to do things and talk to you, or I want you to talk to me, that's talking. But how do we function freely without worrying about one or the other? And this great master, who later did some beautiful koans, did something that I practically have never seen in Zen koans. He quotes a 100-year-old poem. Buketsu said, "How fondly I remember Conan in March. The partridges are calling, the flowers are fragrant." How fondly he goes back to what we are talking about. Remember, there's this poem. Now he goes back to a poem, which right away, in some ways, a funny thing to do in Zen. You're recreating a poem that you didn't write, that's from 100 years ago. And he's saying, that poem said how wonderful it was to be in Conan. The partridges were calling, the flowers were fragrant. So there's a way of presenting the koan that's not what's interesting for me. It's like, but always when I first worked on that, I said, since when does a Zen master quote an old poem that is so not Zen-y, so not immediate, practical? Now, why does he do that? And it took me a long time to realize that he wasn't just doing it in that, do you remember that beautiful poem? And it said this about the birds, and it said this about the flowers. And wasn't that beautiful? No. That's not what he meant. Not at all. That's nostalgia. He didn't mean it as nostalgia. He was bringing a 100-year-old poem right now into this moment. This moment, that poem, it was there. It was relevant to now. It was now. Hillman talks of memoria. Memory is memoria. Memoria for the Greeks was part of oratory, when you are discussing. And memoria first pointed to the fact that you have to, whatever you're talking, however you prepared for this debate or, oration, you've got to know it by heart. No notes, no little index cards, no little chats on the side reminding you what to say. You had to memorize it. But it was really interesting. He said, in their context, it wasn't just that you regurgitated what you had prepared. You actually had to look at the room. You actually had to pay attention to your listeners. You actually had to see what their reaction was. So there was a dimension of mindfulness to memoria. It wasn't just, like kids have to recite poems when it's some point in school, they make them memorize poems. And did you ever see, and I remember, getting up and they're memorizing and reciting the poem, and they're just, am I remembering it? Am I not remembering it? Am I, like that. No, it wasn't, that's not memoria for them. Memoria for them is, no, you're memorizing, but you're not trying to, you're looking around. You're paying attention to others. You're paying attention to a much bigger space than just the words. So that was the old style of looking at memoria, the sense of the room. So when we remember, what kind of memoria consciousness do we bring to that? That's the question for me. So let me give an example. I wrote about this in my blog. I'm brushing my teeth one morning, and there's a little dog in the house, a 14-pound Chihuahua mix, who constantly brings toys for me to throw. Brings a ball, deposits it at my feet, but I'm busy washing my teeth. So do I bend down to pick it up and throw it? No, I kick it for him. And there's a door, and then there's another door behind it. And he kind of blocks it with his body. But he doesn't like that. That's not our usual game. So he goes, like, I'm 14 pounds. Don't tell me to block a ball at the doorway. But he then brings it right back to me, to my feet. What do? I kick it again towards the door and kick it hard. And he blocks it with his body. And now he's really barking like, this isn't the game I wanted to play, And suddenly I have this sharp memory that when I was 9 years old, we were just 2 years after immigration, and we had this little house with this little garage, little yard. And my father, who loved soccer, my father was Romanian by birth, and like every outside U.S. person, loved world football, which was soccer. And he says, now, Eve, you stand over there by the garage, and I'm going to kick this ball, the soccer ball, and your job is to prevent it from going into the garage. Well, I'm 9 years old. I'm not particularly big, so I'm standing there, and he gives it a kick. And I go, wow, that hurt, and he does it again. And this time when he does it, I just scoot out of there. And he says, you're supposed to block the ball. You're supposed to catch it. I say, but it hurts. This is the picture that I remember because of my interaction with the dog, with Henry. Only this time, it isn't the way I'd always thought of it. Not that I think about it very much, but at that time when it happened, I felt kind of victimized. I am a little girl. What does he want from me? I hate those big rushing balls coming at me like that. Now, at the age of 75, I look back and I say, oh, look, my father, he loved soccer. He was like a real sports guy, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to play soccer. But he grew up in a rabbi's family in Romania, and his father told him, no way the son of the rabbi goes to play soccer. So he had to stay inside and study, and outside the window, there are all these boys playing soccer. And I remembered the rest of my life, he always loved the game. It made him so young, and it made him so happy. And he actually died from a heart attack watching a soccer game. And I suddenly thought, I feel so bad for this man. Not in a bad, pitying kind of way, but the pathos of the choices we make and how we grew up and what choices he had given his life, given that style of life in a shtetl in northern Romania with all the elements there, and what that whole setting was, and how few choices it gave people, and how that affected the way he raised us. And that brought me back to his father, And what a nasty guy I still think of him as being. You know, the way he treated his son and how that communicated itself to me and how that. And so suddenly you see such a big picture. And all that came out of me out of just kicking the ball to the door and Henry suddenly going, you know, like that. That's not my game. I don't like this game. Just like the 9-year-old girl so many years later didn't like that game. But what was that? See? So that was, yeah. I could see such a big landscape. And it went not just before when it happened, it was all about me. But now it was about him. It was about how we were at that time, our family, 2 years after immigration, how he grew up, what his father was like, what that whole setting was. And suddenly it's not just about me, it's part of a huge current. Wow. Who knew? Who thought of it like that back then? So again, James Hillman, he says something really lovely, that long-term memory turns events into experiences. You know, when we're much younger, we're just like, oh, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. And he says, no. You know, when we are now, memoria now for us is, he calls it imagination in time. And it is imagination. We're all adding our imagination to it. But it's there's something that's being acted out, something that's being manifested, something that's much bigger asking for our attention. It's like asking us to really look at the big picture, experience it as experience, not as an event, and maybe come to peace with something there. I got a manuscript from 2 men who were second-generation Holocaust survivors, and they asked me, and the whole sense of their conversation in the book was to show how their parents' experiences affected their lives. But the book was mostly about, I grew up this way, I picked up this instrument, I started this major, then I changed my major, then I dated this woman, then I stopped dating her. Then I went there, then I decided to come back. Then we went to Atlanta, and it was when I looked at this and I realized the issue, and I gave him some feedback. For me, the issue with such a book, such a conversation, is that it stays with events. It doesn't go with, but wait a minute, there's an experience behind this. It's much bigger than what you majored in or who you dated or where you traveled. It's what was the experience of it? That was the thing. And what was really great is T.S. Eliot, in his 4 quartets, takes it even further. Let me just read it to you. It seems, as one becomes older, that the past has another pattern and ceases to be a mere sequence. It has another pattern, it ceases to be a mere sequence. The moments of happiness, the sense of well-being, fruition, fulfillment, security or affection, even a very good dinner, the sudden illumination. We had the experience but missed the meaning. We missed the meaning in a difference. An approach to the meaning restores the experience in a different form. Approach to the meaning restores the experience in a different form. And he adds then, I have said before that the past experience revived in the meaning is not the experience of one life only, but of many generations. Isn't that fascinating? When we go into the bigger memory, not just what happened to me, who I was, who they were, what the time was, what the place was. Wow, Now it's taking us into generations. It becomes huge. Another example, because I'm going to ask you for examples too, and to start thinking about them for yourself. My mother, also grew up in East Europe. She grew up in Czechoslovakia. And she grew up also in an Orthodox Jewish family with 11 kids and very poor. And so whenever she talked about her father, it was always one-dimensional. My father was a great man and he loved me. There was no greater man in that city than my father, who was a kosher butcher and made very little money. And that's it. He was great, he was great, he was great. All my life, it stayed this very one-dimensional. My father was a great man. And since he died when she was 16, he died there, I never got to meet him. As my mother aged, she began to think back to her father, and now she's starting to say, she says, I don't understand it. I was such a good girl. I was a religious girl. I always was home to help my mother with the cooking with 11 kids, can you imagine? And the cleaning and the cooking and the laundering and the this and getting things and all of that. And yet, I think my father actually preferred my sister, my younger sister, Eva. Why would he do that? Eva would just run out to go and be with her friends. Eva would go out to play. Eva wasn't like me. She didn't stay home and work hard to help her mother with all that housework. Eva did whatever she felt like. Why would he, could it be true that why did he love her more than he loved me? And this pursued her for years. And then it got even more, I don't know if the word is obsessive or something, as dementia began to come in. But for me, it was fascinating how a one-dimensional relationship, the way I'd heard it for so many years, suddenly there were these questions. And there was a sense of why here I was such a good girl. I did what I was told. I did what I was expected. Why would he love a sister who didn't do anything like that, who was so different? Now, you see, when you really look at it in a big way, she wasn't just, and her sister, younger sister, had died also quite a while ago, so I couldn't, not a matter of whether this was right or wrong. Got nothing to do with what was accurate about it. What is interesting is how she's ready to look at it from in a much bigger way. And that starts pointing to many things, like, because for the rest of her life, my mother was very conscientious, always was that good girl, and you do what you're told, you do what you're expected, you fulfill that. It became a way of life for her. It became a way of life for me also, because that's what I learned from her. And that's what she learned back there. You see? But was there another dimension of living? Could she have lived like her sister? Did she have to be like that? So she's now permitting herself to look at it in a much bigger way. And that takes her not just to herself. It takes her to her father. It takes her to her sister. He takes her to other members of the family. It takes to what that way of life was like. What did it encourage? What did it suppress? She always idealized it, always in her life. They were very poor, but they were very happy. That was the bottom line. Really, really, really. So it's just fascinating what this exercise of memoria, where it takes us. And again, going back to what Peter Levitt said to me last night, see it as an example of the generosity of our mind, the generosity of our psyche, looking at, oh, it was this. Look at that. I never saw that aspect. I never saw that. I never saw that. Wow. Isn't that interesting? It wasn't just about events. It was experiences that may have had their beginnings in beginningless time. And it continues to me. And maybe it continues to my children and to my grandchildren. Look at all that. Oh my, okay. I'm going to open this up for people who really have something to say about this. And while you're thinking about that, yeah, we will break into small groups. And I will ask you to share what you yourself find yourself visiting and revisiting again and again. So even as we start looking at people who would like, so we have some 10 minutes for responses, okay? And then we'll break up and I'll go over the prompts for those small groups. But I see Cheryl already has her hand up. Please, Cheryl.
Thank you for this, Eve. And, I just love this idea that the processing these memories and being triggered by little memories can, and I was thinking of it for myself, and we all have many memories of, either for myself, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, verbal abuse. And I feel so fortunate that I've been able to use some of those memories and in my later age as a process toward forgiveness and even go back into generations. But I don't think I'm saying anything here that anyone isn't feeling or that you didn't touch on. But my question is, why some of us? Why have I had the gift of being able to do that? And yet I see some of my siblings maybe, or in my work, I work with elders often, and sometimes they remain so bitter, no matter what the memories might be. And that's the question, like, why some of us, why not all of us?
Yeah, that question of why some of us and not all of us, you can ask about many, 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 many things. But as we mentioned early, there are some people who find these topics really triggering. They told us. I think we do with trauma what we can. I think this is very raw. I think it arouses a lot of fear. I like to go into those things. There are things I still don't go into, to be honest with you. I can't. At least not yet. In Zen practice, we say that Zen practice is about giving no fear. Giving no fear. The only way, but there is no one formula to that. And I also suggest that there are some people who have, the traumas are so great. I'm thinking of Cambodian women years ago who came and were deaf. Or no, they were blind, if I remember right. And nobody could understand why, because what they'd seen was so horrific that they just lost their vision. So I'm not there to judge anybody on where they go and where they can't go. I just kind of do what I can do. And where somebody wants to and is ready to open things up, I want to support them. That's all I can say at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Jennifer, hi.
Hello. I hope this goes on forever, this series, because each one is a new experience. So I feel like the conversation so far has given me even a deeper insight and more impetus than what I've been doing. My sister, who is 3.5 years older than I am, Bernadine, has been on a journey of Alzheimer's for over 3 years. And there's a lot that she's very much in the present and knows us. And one of the things I decided 3 years ago was that she lives in Chicago and I live in New York, was that every 6 weeks I would go to Chicago for 2 days, short, but that way we would have a running conversation. This was precious time. And I kind of got into realizing that our daily calls are probably very hard for her because I'm always saying, well, what are you doing? Or what are you going to do next? And she really doesn't know what's going to happen next. And so it ends up feeling like I'm questioning her. So what I took on was I sorted out all of our family pictures of when we were little and our parents before we were born, because when she dies, there will be no one who can ever look at these again in the same way. So we've been going through pictures and trying to identify who's who we remember. But the essence of it really is, and I think I just have a little deeper insight, is that it's a way of really turning this into experiences and savoring them and learning more about how she feels about her mother and father, and I do by looking back through the years at them. And it's brought us such delight. It's intense because you're living in this space. And she gets so much enjoyment doing this. And it's precious because I realize now we're also in the process of going deeper, going past, present, future into the experience. So I thank you for kind of having me have a little more insight to this, because it's she always says, are we bringing out the pictures? And then we bring out the pictures and go through them. And it's really sacred for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very generous thing to do. And the way the mind opens up and works, even in Alzheimer's, and responds, is a very generous act by the mind. And I also have a friend with Alzheimer's, and no memory at all. But what her husband did was he printed out the stories that she used to write over many years, and he gave her that. And she says, Eve, it's reading those stories that's the only way that tells me who I was back then. Yeah, thank you. Rachel, please.
I want to tell something that's sort of like what you told about your father. So when I was 13, my brother died of leukemia. He was 16. It was very traumatic because of the way I was not actually included in the whole thing. So it cycles back every year. He died on Thanksgiving Day. And what I've tried to come to peace with is that pieces of this are going to surface every year, instead of like, well, why can't you just let go of all this? You know what I mean? But these different pieces cycle back. So this year I was at a funeral of a friend right in this time period, and at this church that I adore, and the pastor's doing a great job, but there's all this God talk and all this Christian language and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like getting more and more upset and almost nauseated and activated, like triggered. And I sort of looked at that and I thought, what is this? And then I went home and I just thought, what would it have been like, using my imagination, at 13 years old to have lost my only brother, who really actually was a pretty great guy, and to have been sitting in a church listening to this stuff? All this using of concepts and thoughts to put things in a way that they really aren't. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then the next thought I had was, oh my God, what would this have been like for my mother? Because I only learned right before she died from the chaplains at the assisted living place that she lived, that she hated this religious stuff. It pissed her off. My dad taught Sunday school, so she had to go home from the dance early every Saturday night because he was going to get up and teach Sunday school. She really did not like it. And she found no comfort and no solace in it whatsoever. And I thought, what in the world would she have felt like sitting in that church at her son's funeral next to this, right, very religious guy and this small, very confused 13-year-old. I mean, she was not a woman who had really many internal resources anyway. And I just thought, this must have been awful for her. So sort of like what you said, I just had this incredible opening to something that I'd never thought about before, and a lot of compassion for her. So I appreciate your story, and I just wanted to tell you what that was like for me, that opening.
Thank you very much. So now it's time really for us all to tell our stories. I think it's really important, so I really invite you to please join these small groups. Jeff, I think if we could do groups of 5, and Chloe already put the prompt in the chat. What do you find yourself visiting and revisiting from your past? How did you experience it then, and how do you experience it now? This event happened. How does it look to you now? If nothing comes up, think of a person, parent, friend, who revisits his or her past and the story they always tell. Are there changes in how they tell that story? Are there changes in how we tell our stories from the past? Okay, and this, I think we're going to give it, Jeff, it's already 1:01 in my time zone. Could we give this about 24 minutes now? Because it is story-based. And so please come together in your groups, tell your stories. Please practice small group etiquette if you possibly can. Don't hog the mic. Let's hear everybody's story of what happened and how they experience it now. Thank you, everyone. We only have another minute or two. I just want to remind what Jeff said, that we are not meeting on Christmas Day. We're not meeting on New Year's Day. So the next meeting is the 8th, you said, Jeff, and you'll get reminders.
That's correct. Yep.
And that time, it was going to get a lot more physical. Gravity's sag. What's happening to my body? Many of us spiritual types have our heads in the clouds. I have my head in the clouds a lot. When we droop down to, but now our body's going down, down, down. What are we really drooping onto? What's holding us? I do see them. How can I listen to the other talks? Small groups are completely confidential, so we don't listen to other groups' talks. They're also not taped, so they will not appear as part of on the media library. Small groups always stay confidential and private. Okay, it's time, 1:30, in this time zone. Thank you very much for being and for aging so nicely. Thank you for your aging. And may you all have good holidays. Whatever you celebrate every day, really. And also a very good New Year to everyone.